The federal debt and the current fiscal year deficit was already at extremely high levels. And that was when the economy was good. And so usually when the economy is good, that's when you want to lower debt and lower deficit, which wasn't necessarily the case over the past previous years. And so given that we have the COVID-19 pandemic, we're going to see increases in debt. And that is good. That is when we should see increases in debt, is whenever we do have these down economic times. In regards to the budget process, we're most likely going to have another round of continuing resolutions for the next fiscal year. But because legislatures have had to focus on the stimulus packages, they haven't begun all of the work negotiating for the next fiscal year. State budgets are going to have some very serious repercussions. So states are having to fight the COVID-19 pandemic as well. And so they have increased expenditures. But the other part we have to think about that's a little bit more down the line is the foregone revenue states are going to experience. They're not going to have as much income tax or sales tax to help generate their budgets. And states have to have balanced budgets. They don't have all of the same tools as the federal government. They're not able to carry massive amounts of debt. So because of that, they're going to have some very extreme and very deep cuts or other strategies to try to deal with the new fiscal crisis that they're going to have. From the previous act and the interventions from the Great Recession, there's a couple of lessons that can be learned, specifically on the timing and the targeting of those federal interventions to state and local governments. So on the timing, we have to remember that the economic cycle doesn't necessarily match the revenue and expenditure pattern cycle that we see in state and local governments. And with one-time funds, well, what are all of the ties and when can those funds be spent? That's an important thing that state and local governments need to think about. And then also, what are the targets of those interventions? What type of policy interventions are we looking at? And whenever we want to have a speedy delivery of money, which is what we want right now, creating new programs or new bureaucracies to deliver that money can slow down the process. So in some ways, it might be better to deliver that money inside programs that already exist to state and local governments. So there's 4 areas that we need to think about in how states can handle the current economic crisis. So one, they have to think about their revenue streams. So are they generating enough revenue, or what revenue is not going to be sufficient to cover their cost? And are there any ways that they can increase taxes or increase fees to generate more revenue? Also, they have to think about expenditures. So what areas can be cut? And some areas are more easily cut than others, and that might be because of the type of budget, or it might be because of political consequences why some policy areas may or may not be easily cut. Then also we have to think about savings. So state and local governments will have forms of rainy day funds or stabilization funds, but they can't use them all at once. They have to use them sparingly because we still need to have some safety net to handle any future issues that may occur. And then also they have to think about the federal aid. So when does the aid come and how is it going to come? In what policy areas will the federal government help support? Because then that might help the decision making for state governments as well. As the stimulus packages are being negotiated, remember that these are elected representatives that are having to vote and having to make these final decisions on what the packages are going to look like. And they are in an era of heightened partisanship. So as we are seeing the stimulus package negotiations play out, we have seen both Democrats and Republicans try to put different policy objectives into those stimulus bills that do not directly relate to coronavirus relief. And also, we have to keep in mind that a presidential election is not too far away. So elected officials are having to think through their partisan lens and also through the electability lens as well.